All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Insight Policing Livestream Uncut. My name is Dr. Megan Price, and I direct the Center for Applied Insight Conflict Resolution. Andre Brooks, Mike Delaney, and myself, we train insight policing, conflict resolution for law enforcement. And today we're going to be talking about a very interesting article, well, an opinion piece that came out in the Washington Post this week. An opinion based on a New York Times investigation of traffic stops that end in civilian death. Andre is helping us out here with some comic relief in his Kermit the Frog in the shower. So we want to share this with you. And Andre and Mike both have over 30 years in law enforcement. They are experts in the field. And so we're going to talk about, traffic stops, the danger, what it means for civilians to be killed in encounters with the police. So let me just share real quick a PDF of this image, and we'll read a little bit from what the opinion piece says. Okay. All right. So the title is "Being Pulled Over for a Broken Taillight Shouldn't End in Death. Too Often It Does." And this is by, like I said, the Washington Post editorial board from November 15th. And a pretty shocking and startling statistic is that right here, over the past 5 years, more than 400 drivers or passengers who were not wielding a gun or a knife or under pursuit for a violent crime were killed by police during traffic stops. That is a rate of more than one per week. So that's a really disheartening and also surprising statistic. So what comes to mind for you when you read something like that? And yeah, from your perspective.
I mean, one per week is like, that's unreal. It is really unreal. I mean, it's, you would think that the police departments would do more to get their officers training, like insight policing. So the officers, and I know I say this almost every week, but to equip these officers with the tools to communicate, where they won't have to go hands-on or use deadly force or even impact weapons unless it's 100% necessary. But that is an alarming number, and it's a black eye to policing. I mean, I get it. Every situation is different, but one per week that is alarming. And I also read in there that local governments paid out $125 million to settle those 40 of those wrongful death suits that they had arising from that. And it's I don't know, when the alarm needs to be sounded, like, hey, we need to change something. If those stats right there are not don't get your attention, whether you're in policing, in the government, whatever, I don't know what else would.
Yeah, they're high costs of life and treasure for sure. But let's rewind a little bit. Andre, maybe you can answer this. Why is it, and help our audience understand, why is it that traffic stops are thought to be so dangerous in law enforcement? I mean, I hear over and over again that it's one of the most dangerous encounters that officers have with the public. So tell us a little bit about that and where that notion comes from.
Well, I'm gonna answer that, but I also want to touch on your first question about what do you think. When I see that, I think, like Mike, it's alarming, and I think that it's a training issue. But I also find it kind of amusing because, well, not amusing, but I kind of find it, I would like to know a little bit more of the stats on that. Basically, I mean, I want to know what time these traffic stops are occurring, the race of the individual that are being stopped. I think those are important key factors. If you line up, who's being stopped, where they're being stopped, are these things that they track, are they in inner cities, are they rural areas? So, all those kind of things will come into factor as to why there are so many. That's scary to hear that it's one a week. But what's even more scary to hear is I'd like to find out the racial mix-up of the traffic stops that are being done by the officers, and if most of them are black offenders, of people who are of color that are being stopped, as opposed to a white offender. Um, yeah, as it relates to a traffic stop, those are the most dangerous things because you're walking up into the unknown. So a lot of times, especially at night, a lot of people have tents on the windows. You don't know exactly what you're going into. You don't know if somebody's in the car, somebody's in the trunk, what you're going to be faced with when you get to that car. Are you going to come up on somebody with a gun? So you kind of try to use your tactics on every traffic stop, lighting to illuminate the driver. So, they're at a disadvantage. But oftentimes, officers kind of go up and things get, more than likely based on the interaction, the initial interaction is basically how that traffic stop's gonna play out. And obviously, according to these statistics, I'd like to see what that interaction is, and it's probably a training issue. I mean, what caused that interaction to go south like that? And I'd be interested to find out about those things, and to have these communities pay out. It's almost like they're saying, yeah, we kind of screwed up here. There's an issue. But yeah, traffic stops are very dangerous. And it's probably one of the worst things you can probably get yourself into just because of the nature of, this job. And you never know. The unknown with a traffic stop is always the scariest part.
So that's really fascinating. So part of what's scary or really about a traffic stop is that you're walking into the unknown. You don't know who's behind the wheel. You don't know what they have in their car. You don't know how they're going to react to you. And then once the officer does approach the vehicle, if that driver is aggressive or resistant or non-compliant in any way, that sets the tone for the encounter, and that anxiety or concern on the officer's part then rises, right? And the interaction can spiral, can escalate.
Right.
Let me add to what Andre was saying. Is also unknown on the part of the driver and the occupants. A lot of times, let's say it is someone who had just committed a robbery at a store, okay, and for whatever reason, maybe a mile or so down the road, they're being stopped, and maybe the officer is stopping them for a legitimate traffic violation. But the guys in the car who just committed a robbery, they're like, oh no, they know what's going on. They may know what's going on. So it's unknown on both parts. And like you said, Megan, it kind of escalates from there. That initial approach, like Andre said, it kind of dictates how that stop may go. And if they continue to escalate on both ends, then that's going to always result in a bad outcome, I feel.
Right. And use of force of some kind, usually.
Right. So.
Well, let's go back to the article. Did you have something else to say?
No, go ahead. I'm just going to reiterate what Mike said, but you're correct. But no, go ahead, Meg.
Okay, so the article goes on to say, traffic stops are dangerous. Again, in these statistics, we don't know the circumstances, but that another kind of incredible statistic that an officer's chances of being killed, maybe this one isn't quite, an officer's chances of being killed at any vehicle stop are less than 1 in 3.6 million. That's huge. That's a very, it's very, very small. It's a very small chance. Although they could get hurt. Killed is kind of the extreme to that. I'm not sure if that's a fair statistic. But it goes on to say, hidebound training primes police to approach stop cars with a confrontational stance. And then what gets ignored are the earlier choices by police that might have made the shooting avoidable. What are your thoughts there?
I would say that officers are trained. I know, again, like you said, Megan, we've been in policing, me going on 30 years and Andre over 30. We've been trained that that stop can go bad at any second. And the training that we do is for worst case scenario. And a lot of times officers are going with that approach. So they're not going with the approach. If it gets that way, then I'll react to it. They're going with the approach that almost like walking up to a house, maybe a room inside of a house that you know guys are fighting, somebody has a gun, and you're just waiting for something to happen. And it's kind of, I just think the training needs to be adjusted. And again, I know I'm biased because I am an inside policing trainer. And, you know, we focus mainly on conflict resolution, and that's communication. And I think it needs to be overstated in the training nowadays, because even if it's a case that a person does have some kind of weapon that they may not have reached for at that time, communication may be able to get you out of that situation, but you know, without being physical, without going hands-on. So I think, like Andre said, I think training is we have to reevaluate that, you know, and that's how we were trained to go into those situations like that. And we need to look at that again. We need to evolve with our training, with our mindset, and prepare these officers out here, because it's a new day. So.
Well, I think we've talked about this before, and I'm not sure which episode, but about field training officers, or how training prepares you, like you're saying, for the worst case scenario. And then once you're on the street, you have to kind of unlearn so much of what you've learned in the academy to match what you actually meet in the field on the job. And so is this kind of one of those cases where officers are trained that anything can happen at a traffic stop, but maybe there's more training that needs to be done, or just some reality testing around how dangerous a stop is? I might be getting it wrong, but that's kind of where my mind goes.
Well, let me say this, Megan, because there are a lot of factors that come into play into this, you know, and like I said earlier, every traffic stop, and sometimes officers need to start thinking like, okay, every traffic stop is not I'm going to pull you out this car, you're a 55, 60-year-old woman, or you're a young kid with dreads in your hair, a hoodie on, and, you know, because everybody deserves somebody who's going to be dignified to them and treat them with respect. Now, I understand that might not be the case at all times, but I think officers sometimes think about, you know, every stop is the same, and every stop, you can't approach every stop the same, and you can't deal with people, especially during this day and age of cameras and everything else. You can't deal with people like that anymore. It's just not, it's not conducive to the environment right now, with the way policing is changing, and the way people are asking for the things to change in policing. So we got to kind of separate that, because sometimes we don't always stop certain class of people the same way and deal with certain class of people the same way. And, you know, the same could happen when you stop somebody that's not of color, but why aren't they getting shot one time a week as much as people of color are? So there's something there's a real issue going on out here that we see not only in high risk or low risk traffic stops, while people continuously getting shot. And it's got to go back to training. It's got to go back to training and teaching a different way, not to let your guard down in policing, but how do you deal with offenders, and what you do on these traffic stops. It needs to be, you know, everybody needs to get the same thing across the line, unless it dictates other. So it's a real training issue.
I mean, and just again to add to that, it's right now, officers, it's a tough time right now, because you still have to have your safety. Your officer safety has to be on point. You know, you have to go up there with confidence, because if you go up appearing to be afraid, and the person in the car is afraid, again, that's another bad mix. So you still have to control that situation. And again, I think that's where conflict resolution comes in, because there's certain things that you can say, that you can do, that you can point out to that driver and the other occupants that may ease that situation. Even if they may have been thinking about, like, I have a gun, let me go for this gun. It may be something that you're able to communicate before it gets out of hand like that. But again, officer safety, your skills have to be on point when you're dealing with this, because like you said, that's, you know, during a traffic stop and engaging with an individual in their own home. Those are the most dangerous times, you know, and it's this, you have to be on point. You have to be sharp as an officer.
And I don't think that we ever, as long as we've been on doing this, we've ever told anybody to sacrifice their safety or officer survival skills when dealing with traffic stops or domestics or any kind of other issue where conflicts arise. I think that, you know, I think our message here is there's a different way than the way we've been doing, because the way we've been doing it obviously shows that it's not the right way. I mean, you know, that's a disgusting statistic when you look at the numbers there. So, and if you put up the racial makeup of the ones, I mean, I'd be curious to see that. How many of these people who've been shot on traffic stops, how many are Black, how many are white, how many are Hispanic, etc. It's, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes deep. And so I think I think this is a really valuable conversation where officer safety, of course, is important. And traffic stops, you're walking into the unknown, and you don't know who the person is, you don't know what they're doing or what they're intending. And so it's a high risk encounter, right? Even if it's just for a broken tail light or, you know, failing to signal. You just don't know what you're going to be dealing with. And so to maintain your safety tactics, but also recognize conflict behavior, right? When somebody's mad that you're stopping them or doesn't think it's fair, then use your communication tactics too to bring that under control, so that the situation doesn't escalate to the point where officers feel like they have to defend themselves by using lethal force, right? So if we can reach that comprehensive kind of set of skills that protect both the officer and the drivers or the citizens, then we'd be in a much better place and see these statistics really go down. And of course, you know, also examining who's being who are the victims of these officer involved shootings, and how does it fall disproportionately on people of color. And then and I think part of addressing that is, just like you're saying, Andre, approaching everyone with dignity and with curiosity. Why are you here, right? While tactically maintaining your own personal safety.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So one last question before we wrap up, but at the end of this opinion piece, it says, well, maybe we should just get rid of traffic stops altogether. What do you think about that?
Well, I think getting rid of traffic stops altogether, I mean, I think that's a drastic step right there, because you know, Andre and I were both homicide investigators, but before we actually retired from our police department, we were fugitive recovery agents, I guess you say, but on the police department. And what we would do we would be in charge of apprehending like those violent offenders for homicides, rapes, robberies, and things like that. And I would say a high percentage of our apprehensions of those type of people were in the midst of a traffic stop. You know, once we learned where they were and you know, put a game plan together, we stopped them in traffic. And to get rid of traffic stops, I don't know if that's the answer. I think that's kind of drastic, in my opinion. I just, like we've been saying, we preach this, that training. Let's change our approach. Let's arm these officers with better tools, where they're safer, the community safe, as well as the people and the passengers in the vehicle and the drivers as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm never a proponent of stopping traffic stops. You get so much from a traffic stop. I mean, somebody that's under the influence of either drugs or alcohol, or stolen cars, or tags that don't belong on the cars. I mean, it's almost just like saying, hey, you know, don't go out here and proactively patrol, you know, in these communities anymore. And almost that's almost what's happening. really during this day and age. But then you add into that to get rid of traffic stops. I mean, you got people out here all the times with cars with no insurance, and that have a bunch of liability, not only to police officers but to the public. And so, I am not a proponent at all in stopping traffic stops. I think that the police need to be a little bit uncuffed in doing their job, not only traffic, but also proactively going back into the communities and policing, but just policing differently, if that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Well, so much to think about. Thank you guys, Andre and Mike, for your perspectives, always enlightening. And for those of you who are watching, thank you. And let us know what you think in the comments. We'll see you next week.